I woke up before dawn touched the skyline of San Francisco. The city was still wrapped in mist, glass towers in the distance reflecting the cold blue light of morning. I made coffee, opened my laptop, and began working long before most of my coworkers even stirred in their beds. By 6, my coffee had gone half cold, and the client dashboard was already flashing with over a dozen red alerts. I worked for NeuraLink Systems, a tech company specializing in AI-driven marketing automation. It sounded glamorous, but the reality was chaos, disconnected processes, overlapping projects, and a fragile order held together only by people like me. I managed our biggest client, Viridian Group, a $14 million annual contract. For the company, it was the lifeline. For me, it was both burden and pride. My mornings usually began with urgent emails from Europe and ended with technical updates from Singapore. I knew every inch of the project, how the algorithm failed because of incomplete datasets, or that Viridian preferred PDF reports over dashboards. No one taught me that. I learned by watching and being forced to fix things. I was used to going unseen. At Neuralink, if you did your job too well, people assumed you weren't doing anything at all. The company loved to talk about innovation, speed, and vision. But I knew what hid behind those glossy PowerPoint decks, layers of patchwork systems that only I kept running. I wasn't praised for it. I didn't need to be. I just wanted the work to survive long enough that no one lost their job because of someone else's stupidity. That noon, I went down to the small cafe in the lobby. Lauren was already there, holding a paper cup with the words handwritten on it, "Don't burn out." She was the only person in the company who really knew what I did. Lauren worked in data operations, a smart, sharp woman, sometimes hot-tempered, but loyal in a way that's rare. She looked up. "Another late night?" I nodded. Viridian's system glitched again. "It's fixed now. You can't keep this up, Ava." I smiled. "If I don't, who will?" Lauren studied me for a moment, like she wanted to say something but didn't. She just pushed the coffee toward me, worry flickering in her eyes. I didn't blame her. She knew how hard I'd been holding this company together. By afternoon, I was on another client call. They always wanted me there, even when it wasn't necessary. A man's voice came through the line. "Ava, were you the one who fixed the routing issue last week? My team's never seen a turnaround that fast." I gave a faint smile. "We try to keep our promises." No one at Neuralink ever heard that compliment. They only saw results, not the effort behind them. I'd learned to live with that. Night fell, and I stayed in the office long after everyone had gone. The only sounds were the keyboard clicks and the soft hum of machines. I opened the contract tracker, scanning each clause out of habit. I'd memorized them all, but I still checked because here, one overlooked line could cost millions. At 10:30, I finally leaned back, saved my files, and shut down my laptop. The morning coffee sat untouched beside me, now completely cold. I glanced out the window. The city below shimmered like a giant circuit board, each building pulsing on and off with light. Another day gone, another quiet rescue no one would notice. Just as I slipped on my coat, a new notification lit up my phone. The subject line was clear. "Welcome our new Vice President of Operations, Derek Hale." I froze, staring at the screen. In that single moment, I knew nothing would stay peaceful for long. I still remember the chill that crept over me as I read those words. Simple, ordinary, yet carrying the weight of something dark approaching. I stood there, phone in hand, its glow cutting across my tired face. Years of holding everything steady suddenly felt meaningless, erased by the arrival of someone with power, ambition, and intentions I couldn't yet see. Maybe you've been there too, working yourself to exhaustion while your effort fades into someone else's shadow. Watching everything you've built risks being swept away by a decision made by someone who never understood how it all really worked. If you have, then you know what I saw in that message. It wasn't a welcome announcement. It was the first ripple of war. And if you're still listening, tell me, where are you hearing this story from? Share your thoughts below. I read every comment. And if you love stories of quiet revenge and calm, calculated justice, hit subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. because from this moment on, the game has only just begun. The next morning, the office felt different. People clustered around the coffee machine more than usual, voices low, curious glances, and the practiced pleasantries of a rehearsed scene. At NeuraLink, days when someone new arrived were like a small festival, and Derek Hale, the new vice president of operations, was the center of it all. I walked into the conference room to find it full. Derek stood at the head of the table in a perfectly fitting white shirt, a smile so flawless it read as fake. He spoke like every line had been rehearsed in front of a mirror. His voice was confident, measured, and he threw in the occasional joke that got polite laughter, even when no one really found it funny. "We are at a golden moment for the tech industry," he said, his hand making a conducting motion. "AI is not just a tool, it is the future of every business strategy. I am here to help us move faster, leaner, and to leave behind any old processes that hold us back." Eyes turned toward him and then slid past me. I understood what he meant by old processes. Those were my processes, the ones I had built and refined over 5 years to keep the company's largest contract from collapsing. I sat still and listened. When the meeting ended, he came over to me. "Ava Morgan," he said in a deliberately familiar tone. "I hear you are the one keeping Viridian Group satisfied." "I only do my job," I answered. He smiled, tilting his head as if appraising me. "Good. I like people who know their place. I think we will work well together," he said, "if you are willing to adapt." I did not ask to adapt to what. I nodded and left the room. As the door closed, I heard his laugh behind me, short, cold, and smooth like metal. In the weeks that followed, Derek cultivated the image of a dynamic leader. He walked the floor, spoke to teams, promised change, and sketched a new vision. The higher-ups liked him. They saw in him a fresh wind, or rather, what they wanted to believe innovation looked like. Lauren watched and shook her head. "You see that?" she said. "He is just repackaging what you did, adding words like AI and optimization to sound modern." "I know," I said, eyes still on the screen where Viridian's data flowed. "Let him talk. When the system fails, he will have to call me." "You are too calm about this," Lauren said. "Calm does not mean weak," I replied. A month passed, and Derek held his first strategy meeting. I was not invited. Lauren sent me a screenshot from Slack showing a strategy session led by Vice President Derek Hale. My name was not on the attendee list. That afternoon, Derek emailed me a brief note. "Ava," he wrote, "I reviewed your reporting process. Very detailed, but a bit heavy. I want to try a simpler version focused on key performance indicators rather than precision. I hope you do not mind if I temporarily change the method," I replied tersely. "No problem, as long as you take responsibility if anything goes wrong." He did not answer. 3 days later, Viridian reported data. Errors in the performance report. I spent a night fixing it, rebuilding the system, and sending a corrected version before they noticed. The next morning at the office, Derek told the marketing team he had personally directed the fix overnight. I paused in the doorway as he continued. "We need that proactive spirit," he said. "We cannot keep relying on those old processes." He saw me and smiled as if nothing had happened. I smiled too, but inside there was a cold hollow. That night, I sat alone and opened the welcome email the company had sent on my first day. In his introduction, it said Derek Hale had helped restructure 2 tech companies in Seattle. I did a quick check. One of those companies had collapsed within 8 months of his departure. I did not need more proof to know what was coming. The next day, he called me into the conference room. "Ava," he said softly, "I think you should focus more on the technical side. I will handle client presentations. Do not get me wrong, I just want to align the leadership voice." I looked at him. "Do you want alignment or control?" I asked. "Both," he said with a slight laugh. I left without another word. Lauren waited in the hallway, worry written across her face. "He is cutting you out of the project," she said. "I know," I said, gripping my coffee cup. "Let him think he is winning. Sometimes silence is the first move in a counterattack." Lauren fell silent. She knew I was not joking. From that moment on, I understood that my quiet peace at NeuraLink had officially ended. 2 weeks later, Derek held the company-wide meeting he called the first since taking charge. The announcement went out the night before, with the subject line in all caps: Mandatory All System Innovation Strategy Meeting. I read it without surprise. Since he arrived, the solid processes had turned into a string of performative rituals. The meeting took place in the largest conference room, where glass walls reflected a cold white light and faces tried to look engaged. Derek stood center stage beside a massive LED screen showing slides titled Innovation Sprint. He spoke about speed, change, and startup spirit. His voice filled the room, measured, theatrical, and forceful. Every few minutes, he paused for a laugh or to cue the sparse, programmed applause. I sat in the second row, watching the numbers on his charts. They looked polished, but I knew many had been distorted. Just by scanning the KPI rates, I understood he was manufacturing the illusion that his changes were producing results. When it was my turn to report on the Viridian Group contract, Derek signaled me with a gesture. I stood, took the clicker, and opened my slide. I will update on the Iridian project status. I began, steady and precise. We maintained a stability rate of 98% response time on our service level agreement this quarter, and customer satisfaction rose slightly to 4.7 out of 5. However, there are risks related to the new testing system rollout that I need to report on. Before I finished, Derek cut me off. He stepped forward, smiling, but his eyes were cold. "Thank you, Ava. Very detailed as always," he said, then turned to the room. "But you see, this is exactly why we need to innovate. Old ways bog us down in detail instead of letting us see the big picture. I don't want our team stuck in that old mindset anymore." The room fell quiet. I stood there, with the clicker still in my hand. He looked back at me, smile unchanged, voice dropping. "You know what I mean, Ava. We need to move forward. We can't keep clinging to old processes just because they used to work." A few people coughed. Someone pulled out a phone and started typing. I felt eyes slide away. I set the clicker on the table and nodded slightly. "I understand," I said, trying to keep my voice even. "But those old processes are what keep our $14 million contract standing, Derek." He smiled, tighter this time, and into the microphone he said, loud enough for the room to hear, "And that's why we must dare to change, even if it makes some people uncomfortable." I wanted to answer, but my microphone suddenly went silent. On the screen, the mute icon appeared. I looked down at the controller and tried to switch it back on. It wouldn't work. He had cut my mic. Derek turned back to the audience, still smiling. "Okay, let's continue," he said, and moved to the next slide, where my name had been removed from the presentation. The air felt frozen. I stepped back and said, "Nothing." Inside, my heart beat slow and heavy. From the back row, Lauren watched me, eyes wide with alarm. I shook my head slightly. "Not now." The meeting went on for nearly another hour. When it ended, people left in silence. Some avoided looking at me, others placed a hand on my shoulder as if to comfort me. I nodded and smiled, pretending nothing had happened. Lauren caught up with me in the hallway. "Are you okay?" she asked. "He can't do that publicly." I stopped and looked at her. "You saw," I said. "He just did. You have to respond, Ava. When someone insults you like that," I cut her off. "No, I won't respond. I'll remember." That afternoon, back at my desk, the slide still sat open, the portion where I had been cut off. I saved the original file and renamed it evidence_1. That night, I went home late. The city below the Golden Gate still glowed. I poured a glass of wine and sat at the small desk by the window. Beside me, the old clock my father left me ticked on, with its worn, minute hand, but steady. I looked at it and thought quietly, not yet. Then I opened the Viridian contract and read through every clause. On the last page, a small note, only the legal lead and I knew was there, caught my eye. Continuity clause. Named personnel. Ava Morgan. I lingered on it, my hand resting on the screen, my gaze growing cold. I knew if he wanted a fight, I would let him choose the day it began. I spent the entire weekend in my small apartment in the Mission District, barely stepping outside. The city stayed loud, but inside me was an eerie stillness. I knew I had crossed a line, one where every decision had to be exact. Derek had humiliated me in front of the entire company, but what he didn't know was that I always planned for the worst. And this time, I already had something he could never see coming. On Monday morning, I arrived at the office early as usual. The hallway was empty, except for the quiet hiss of the coffee machine. I powered on my laptop, accessed the contract archive, and pulled up the original agreement between NeuraLink and Viridian Group. I had been part of the signing process back in 2020, when both companies were still in chaos from the pandemic. At that time, Viridian demanded a clause ensuring continuity of key personnel to guarantee project stability. I remembered adding a small line with the legal advisor at the very end of the document. If Ava Morgan, the assigned personnel, steps down from her active role, the client reserves the right to terminate the contract unilaterally without compensation. Most people thought it was just a formality. I knew better. It was the safety line in case everything fell apart, and now it could become my weapon. I downloaded the contract and saved it in a private folder named Continuity. Then I sent a copy to my personal inbox with a short subject line: Insurance 6.4B, nothing else. In the corporate world, a single well-timed word was worth more than an entire speech. When Lauren arrived, I was already at my desk. She gave me a curious, worried look. "What are you doing?" "Just checking a few things," I said without looking up. "Checking what? You look like you're plotting someone's murder." I laughed softly. "Nothing like that. I just like to make sure everything is safe." Lauren sat down beside me, lowering her voice. "Ava, what are you planning to do about him? The way he looked at you the other day, he thinks you're going to quit." "Good," I said, eyes still on the screen. "If he thinks that, I'll let him believe it for a while." That afternoon, Derek sent me a Slack message. "Ava, my team is testing a new management platform. Can you transfer the Viridian data into it?" "Has it been tested?" I replied. Almost instantly, he answered, "No need to test. Just do it. We'll optimize as we go." I leaned back in my chair and smiled. Optimize as we go, the favorite phrase of people who have no idea what real risk means. I noted down every one of his requests and saved them in a folder named Evidence. I didn't need to start a fight. I just needed to record carelessness. Over the next 2 weeks, Derek kept changing procedures, cutting review steps, and demanding shorter reports to save time. I quietly documented everything: every email, every chat, every reckless decision. Lauren sometimes glanced at me with doubt, but didn't ask questions. One evening, after everyone else had left, she came to my desk. "Ava, I have to ask, what are you planning?" I turned off my screen and looked at her. "Nothing. I just don't want my work destroyed by someone who doesn't understand it." "Are you going to sue him?" "I don't need to sue anyone. He'll do that part for me." Lauren stayed silent for a while. "I don't know what you're plotting, but please don't lose yourself in it." I smiled faintly, my voice calm. "I'm not taking revenge, Lauren. I'm protecting what's mine." The next day, system errors began to appear. Red alerts blinked across the internal dashboard. Viridian's data was off by nearly 5%. Derek looked oddly calm. He gathered the team and said loudly, "Don't panic. Blame it on the old integrations. We'll fix it later." I sat in the corner, listening carefully, recording every minute. After the meeting, I sent a short email to the legal department. "Risk alert. Unverified process update." I attached the meeting recording. No comments, no conclusions, just information. I knew exactly how the legal team reacted to documents like that. That night, as I was leaving the office, Lauren called after me. "Are you sure you're doing the right thing?" I turned back. The yellow lights fell across both our faces. "I'm not doing anything, Lauren. I'm just waiting for what's already coming." On my way home, I stopped by a small cafe I liked. Outside, the air was cold, fog misting the glass. I sat near the window, opened my laptop, and logged into the monitoring system. Lines of data streamed across the screen like the heartbeat of something I had built with my own hands. Anyone who touched it without understanding would break it eventually. I took a sip of coffee, the bitterness spreading on my tongue. A Slack notification popped up. "System error detected." I smiled, quietly, calmly, as if watching a distant storm take shape. I closed the laptop, left a few coins on the table, and walked out. The wind picked up, sweeping the fog from the glass. In that moment, one thought filled my mind. When people believe they control everything, That's when they're about to lose it all. 2 weeks later, everything felt tight, like a wire about to snap. System errors were showing up more often, and the client had started asking questions. But instead of admitting fault, Derek called for an emergency meeting to handle what he called a crisis in internal communication. I sat quietly in the corner, watching him speak with that rehearsed calm, pretending everything was under control. "We're being misunderstood," Derek said, scanning the room. "A few reports have leaked, and there are rumors that client data has been compromised. I've asked the IT team to verify. For now, we'll issue a statement saying there was a minor technical glitch, nothing that affects the contract." I watched him, the forced smile glued to his face. I knew he was afraid. But men like Derek always hide their fear behind confidence. He still believed that if he said the right words, people would follow. That afternoon, I received an email from HR. "Ava, we need to speak regarding certain concerns about project data security." I knew exactly what that meant. The meeting room was dim. Dana, the senior HR officer, sat at the head of the table, next to an internal lawyer I'd never seen before. Both of them looked cautious. "Ava," Dana began, "we've received information suggesting there might have been a data leak from your account." I leaned back, keeping my tone steady. "From my account?" "Yes, a copy of Viridian's data was sent externally last week." "And the evidence?" "We're still investigating." I understood right then this was Derek's move. He needed a scapegoat, and I was the perfect one. The person with the deepest access, and the one he wanted gone. "Do you have anything to say?" Dana asked gently, her eyes wary. "I just have one question," I said slowly. "Who else has permission to grant client data access besides me?" Dana hesitated, glancing at the lawyer. "The Vice President of Operations." "Thank you," I said, standing up. "Then perhaps that's where you should start your investigation." I left the room before they could reply. Lauren was waiting outside, her face pale. They really think you did it?" "I think so," I said. "Or more precisely, Derek wants them to." Lauren pulled me into a small room and shut the door. "Ava, I have something. I'm not sure if you want to see it." She opened her laptop and played a video from the internal security cameras. Derek, the night before, sitting in the meeting room, plugging his personal USB drive into the data system. "I just stumbled on it," she whispered. "He forgot I have camera access because of the backup project." I watched the footage, my breath slowing. "You kept the original?" "Of course. I backed up another copy from the server, too." "Good." The next morning, I sent an email to the legal department with the video attached. No explanation, no comments. Just a short subject line: unauthorized data access. Vice President Operations. By noon, the office atmosphere shifted. Derek still acted casual, strolling through the halls with his usual smile, but I saw the unease behind his eyes. The rumor had spread. HR paused their investigation into me, and the legal department launched an independent audit. In the afternoon, Derek called me to his office. It was large, bright, with a glass wall overlooking the bay. He stood facing the window, his voice calm but tight. "I heard you sent something to legal," he said. "I think there's been a misunderstanding." "There's no misunderstanding," I said. "I just thought they should know who actually has access to the data." He turned, smiling faintly. "You're clever, Ava, but you're going too far." "Are you trying to start a war?" "I don't need a war," I said. "I just need the truth." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Do you think you're irreplaceable? Any contract can be rewritten. Any process can be rebuilt." I met his eyes. "Maybe. But there are clauses you haven't read yet, Derek." He frowned, suspicion flickering. "What are you implying?" "I'm saying before you try to remove someone, make sure you know exactly what you're standing on." I left before he could speak again. Lauren waited by the elevator, tense. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine," I said. "He's starting to lose his grip. You think he'll stop?" "Of course not," I said as the elevator doors opened. "But let him believe he's still winning. The more confident he feels, the less he'll see how close he is to the edge." That night, back home, I opened my laptop and reread the response from legal. "Thank you, Ava. We are addressing the matter." At the bottom was a small note. "Please confirm you remain the primary lead for the Viridian contract." I replied, "Yes. I'm still here, for now, until it's time to leave." I closed the laptop, poured a little wine, and looked out the window. The San Francisco sky was swallowed in fog, the Bay Bridge lights fading in the thin rain. I knew I had reached the turning point. Derek might have struck first, but he had just stepped into the trap he never realized I'd already set. And now, all I had to do was wait. That morning, the sky hung heavy and gray as if San Francisco itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to break. No one said it out loud, but everyone in the office felt the unease. Whispers filled the hallways, glances darted away, and emails were clipped down to the barest words. I walked through the corridor, each step slow and steady. The day had come sooner than I expected. The night before, Derek had sent a company-wide announcement, an all-caps invitation that read, "Company Strategy Update Meeting at 9 in the morning, mandatory attendance." This time, I knew exactly what he planned to do. He would try to prove that I was no longer necessary, that NeuraLink could run without me. It was arrogant, foolish, and the perfect stage for his downfall. I arrived 10 minutes early. The meeting was hosted on Zoom with nearly 200 participants. Each camera tile flickered on like a mosaic: leadership, tech teams, client services, and the Viridian project crew. Lauren messaged me, "Are you sure about this?" "Never been surer," I replied. At exactly 9, Derek appeared, smiling brightly, suit immaculate. "Good morning, everyone," he began, his usual confident leadership tone filling the call. "Today marks an important step forward. We're entering a new phase for NeuraLink, faster, leaner, and more global." I sat straight, watching him through the screen, expressionless. He moved through slides filled with charts, cost reductions, and forecasts of so-called growth. Everything looked impressive on the surface, but anyone who had actually worked in the trenches could see it for what it was: a performance. By the 10th minute, he reached the part he had been waiting for: contract management, Viridian account. Previously, he said, this project was managed by Ava Morgan. She's done well, and I recognize that. But starting next quarter, we'll transition all operations to our offshore team in Singapore to optimize costs and accelerate delivery. A few people frowned. I caught the Viridian representative's surprised look on screen. Derek kept talking. "This is a necessary step for our evolution. Please join me in welcoming this new chapter." Then he turned toward me, his smile unchanged. "Ava, would you like to say a few words before we make it official?" I stayed silent. The pause stretched long, heavy. Lauren texted again, "Do it now." I turned on my camera. Derek looked startled but quickly composed himself. "Ah, there she is, Ava," he said, forcing a laugh. I didn't speak. I looked directly into the lens. Morning light from the window lit my face evenly. In my right hand was my employee badge, the one I'd swiped through the security gate every day for 5 years. In my left hand, a sheet of white paper printed with one clear line and signature. A resignation letter effective at 9 a.m. Behind me, my Zoom background was solid black with a single white phrase across it. Effective 9:01 a.m. No one spoke. I could hear people's breathing through their mics. A few cameras went dark. Derek's smile faltered, his voice tight. "Ava, maybe we should discuss this privately." I muted my mic, not to stay silent, but to stop myself from saying anything more. Words were unnecessary now. 9:01. I glanced at the antique watch on my wrist. The second hand aligned perfectly. I clicked End Meeting for me. My screen went dark. My image disappeared. In that moment, I knew I had left, and that the company had just lost its soul. On the other side, Derek stood frozen. People stared at each other, confused. Lauren told me later that for several seconds, no one dared to speak. Then the meeting pinged again, and Susan Reynolds had left the meeting. Another pause, and someone whispered, "Clause 6.4b." I didn't hear the rest. I had already closed my laptop, folded my resignation letter, set my badge on the desk, and walked out of the apartment. The sky outside was clearing after rain, the air cool and damp. I walked slowly down the sidewalk, the wind brushing past my coat, feeling a strange calm. My phone buzzed. A text from Lauren, "You just triggered it." I replied, "I know." Moments later, an email flashed across my screen. Termination notice, activation of clause 6.4b. I didn't need to open it. The first line was enough, effective immediately. By now, the office would be in chaos. Executives scrambling, lawyers tearing through contracts, Derek spinning his excuses, but it was too late. I stopped by my usual cafe and ordered an Americano. When the cup was placed before me, I caught my reflection in the polished table. A calm face, neither angry nor triumphant, only the quiet of someone who had reclaimed what should never have been taken, the right to be heard. In my head, I heard my father's voice. Power isn't in the shout, but in the moment everyone else falls silent to listen. And that morning, NeuraLink listened, in silence. Just minutes after I left the meeting, NeuraLink's office was thrown into chaos. Lauren told me later that no one understood what had just happened. They stared at each other, then at the empty Zoom screen where my name had vanished. The entire floor went silent. Then, as the sound of incoming emails filled the air, everything began to collapse. A message from Viridian Group went out to every contact point. Activation of Clause 6.4b. Immediate termination of contract. No further obligations. One short sentence, but it was a death sentence for the company. Slack exploded. Does anyone know what's happening? What is Clause 6.4b? Who approved her resignation? Departments scrambled for answers. Legal called an emergency meeting. The board was on the phone, nonstop. And Derek, the same man who had stood so confidently just an hour earlier, was now surrounded by faces cold as steel. Lauren texted me, "You should see this. He's white as a sheet." Within an hour, Viridian's email had been forwarded dozens of times. Someone flagged it as urgent. Someone else added a note. Need confirmation of clause validity. But none of it mattered. I knew because I had written that addendum myself 3 years earlier with the legal counsel, and I also knew Viridian would never come back. 10:15 in the morning. The 12th floor conference room was in disarray. Derek tried to calm everyone down, his voice cracking. "This is just a misunderstanding. They'll come back. We can renegotiate." One of the technical directors cut him off. "They said no further obligations, Derek. Do you understand what that means? It's over." I could picture it perfectly. He stood there, fists clenched, face pale, forcing a smile no one believed anymore. By noon, a tweet appeared from a Viridian employee. VP silences project lead on live call. The next morning, $1 million contract was gone. Karma works fast. Within 2 hours, the post had over 10,000 shares. The hashtag muted her spread across Twitter. Derek started emailing the company. Subject line, "Change brings opportunity." The message was short and clumsy. "We will take this as a lesson. Through crisis, we will grow stronger." At the end, he added a misplaced quote, "In chaos, there is opportunity." Lauren sent me a screenshot of the email with a note. No one believes him anymore. People are walking out of meetings. By late afternoon, the legal team met with the board. Tom, the senior counsel, the only one who fully understood the contract, stood up mid-meeting, his tone flat. Clause 6.4b is fully valid, signed by both parties, still in effect. Termination of Ava Morgan, voluntary or otherwise, voids the agreement immediately. One board member asked, "Why were we not informed of this?" Tom replied, "Because no one bothered to read the appendix she wrote." After the meeting, Tom went straight to Derek's office. The door closed, but Lauren said the shouting was loud enough for the whole floor to hear. No one commented, but everyone knew. Derek was out of moves. By 5 that evening, an internal email went out. Derek Hale has been suspended from his role as Vice President of Operations pending an internal investigation. The company held its breath. A few employees reacted with the clapping emoji, even though they knew they shouldn't. Outside, rain began to fall. I sat in a cafe, listening to the sound blend with the vibration of messages on my phone. Lauren sent me a meme going around the internal chat, A photo of Derek with the slogan, "Speed over perfection," crossed out and replaced with silence over leadership. I laughed quietly, not out of joy, but at the bitter irony of corporate justice. That night, tech news sites picked up the story. NeuraLink loses $1 million contract after an internal dispute. The article didn't mention my name, only said a senior manager was removed from a major project without a proper succession plan. In the comments, someone wrote, "Looks like they silenced the wrong person." Back at Neuralink, the office lights stayed on late. Those who once praised Derek now avoided him. Those who ignored me whispered about the deadly clause. The PR team rushed to draft an apology, but Viridian never replied. Investors demanded explanations. Lauren texted before midnight. They've been in crisis meetings for 3 hours. Still no press release. The CEO is screaming at someone in Florida. Derek's not coming back. I looked at my phone, paused, then typed, "Don't celebrate. No one wins in this. Only those who know when to stop survive." She replied, "You really think he'll stop?" "No," I wrote back, "but the system already has." That night, I stepped out onto my balcony and looked over the city lights reflecting on the bay. The cold wind carried mist across my face, and somewhere in the distance, I heard the familiar sound of a machine powering down. Slow, heavy, final. Neuralink had lost its soul, and Derek had erased himself. 3 days after the news broke that Neuralink had lost its $14 million contract, the air inside the company felt suffocating, as if the building itself had forgotten how to breathe. No one spoke louder than a whisper. They passed each other in the hallways, avoiding eye contact, skipping the usual greetings. Every footstep echoed through the hollow corridors of a place that was once believed to be untouchable. I wasn't there anymore, but Lauren told me everything, like she was watching it all unfold in slow motion. "No one dares to say your name," she said, "but they keep talking about the clause, like it's some kind of legend now. Clause 6.4b. They say you didn't need to shout, you just needed to sign." I didn't laugh. I just listened, hearing the occasional tap of her keyboard in the background. Lauren stayed at Neuralink a little longer, mostly to observe, not out of loyalty. She said lately the Slack channels were eerily quiet. Departments avoided the word Viridian, and every meeting began with the same line, "Let's stay calm." But no one really was. That morning, I sat at my usual cafe, at the same table by the window overlooking the bay. I still came here out of habit, still ordered black coffee with no sugar. The only difference was that I no longer carried two work phones or watched real-time dashboards flash on the screen. In front of me sat a laptop, open to a blank document, pure white, waiting for me to begin a new chapter that no one could interrupt. Lauren texted me, "Tom, the lawyer, just resigned. They said he couldn't handle the pressure. Derek's suspension has become indefinite. His Slack account's locked. Desk cleared. Someone left a note that says speed over perfection." I read it, then put my phone down. I didn't feel joy, but I wasn't angry either. Just tired, calm in a way that comes only after the last storm has passed, when the ground is bare but still warm from the sun. That afternoon, an email arrived from Viridian Group. The subject line was simple: consulting proposal. "Ava, we appreciate your dedication and professionalism throughout our partnership. We are currently seeking an independent consultant for an internal restructuring project. If you're interested, we would be honored to work with you." I read every word slowly. The line "we would be honored to work with you" caught in my throat, not out of pride, but because I had forgotten what being respected felt like. I replied briefly, "Thank you. Give me a week to consider." That evening, I walked along the Embarcadero Pier. The wind carried the scent of salt and metal from the old railings. Golden lights from the Bay Bridge rippled across the water. I walked slowly, listening to the sound of my footsteps mixing with distant ship horns. No one recognized me. No one knew the story that had ended just 3 days earlier. And for the first time, that felt peaceful. On my way home, I stopped at a small stationery store on the corner. I bought a stack of blank paper and a fountain pen. I hadn't written by hand in years. At Neuralink, everything had been PDFs, charts, and cold numbers. But that night, I opened one to the first page and wrote, Never let anyone make you believe silence is weakness. Some battles can only be won quietly. As the ink dried, my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. Thank you for the most expensive lesson of my life. D. I stared at it for a long time. It could have been Derek or someone else from the company. Either way, I didn't reply. Not out of bitterness, but because it no longer mattered. My story had ended. He was still buried under his own ruins. The next day, Lauren called. Her voice sounded weary but lighter. You were right. They're about to be acquired. The board's been in closed meetings. Rumor says Derek's looking for a lawyer. And you? I asked. I resigned. I think it's time to start over. What about you? I'm learning how to sit still, I said. Do you regret it? I paused. No. But I wish it didn't have to go that far. Lauren sighed. You're always so calm. I just wish I could have screamed at him that day. You didn't need to, I said softly. He's been hearing that scream ever since, in his own head. After the call, I sat there for a long time. The afternoon light slanted through the window, glinting across the wooden table. My shadow folded against the wall, small but clear. I opened my laptop, staring at the Viridian email I still hadn't answered. I thought about what it would mean to start over, somewhere I wouldn't have to prove my worth every single day. Maybe I'd accept, maybe I wouldn't. But this time, whatever I chose would be for me. Before leaving, I took out the last sheet of paper with the NeuraLink logo, one I'd kept without knowing why, and tore it in half. I crumpled the pieces in my hand and tossed them into the trash by the door. The paper landed softly, soundlessly, yet in my head, it echoed like a full stop. I stepped outside. The city that night felt quieter than usual, or maybe I just wasn't listening with the same ears anymore. The sky was wrapped in fog, car lights stretching into soft streaks, and in that moment, I realized not every ending needs an explosion. Sometimes, all it takes is a single breath, one slow step, and silence long enough to know you're finally free. A month had passed since I left Neuralink. The city had changed seasons, the wind sharper, the sunlight thinner, the trees along the bay fading to gold before shedding with each passing gust. My life had settled into a different rhythm, slower, quieter, but deliberate. Each morning, I made coffee, opened the window, and listened to birdsong mixing with the distant hum of traffic. No more surprise meetings, no midnight emails, no constant need to prove my worth. I was finally living, something I used to think was a luxury. One morning, I got a call from an unfamiliar number. The woman's voice was calm but clear. Hello, Ava. This is Clara, Human Resources Director at Viridian Group. We'd like to invite you to take on an independent strategy consultant role for 6 months. We need someone who understands both systems and people, like you. I paused for a moment. 6 months. Not long, but long enough to open a new door. I asked, who would I be working with? Claire replied directly to the executive board, and we'd like you to choose your own working team. We trust your leadership. I let out a quiet laugh. It had been a long time since anyone had said the word trust to me so simply. I'll need a few days to think about it, I said. Of course, Claire answered. If you agree, we'll handle everything. No strings attached. After the call, I looked around my small apartment. Morning light streamed through the curtains and across my desk, where a few old project drafts still sat, a stack of notes, a yellow sticky paper that read, Freedom doesn't come from winning against others. It comes from no longer being bound by them. I knew I was ready. 2 days later, I said yes. The contract arrived by email, short, clear, no unnecessary clauses, no controlling language. Just one line at the end made me smile. We trust your self-management and integrity. I began the new job with a completely different feeling. No one hovered over my reports. No meetings where I had to measure every word to keep someone else comfortable. At Viridian, people asked for my opinion, listened, debated, but never interrupted. Once, a young engineer asked me, how can you stay so calm when people underestimate you? I told him, being calm doesn't mean being weak. It just means I already know how the story ends. They laughed, but I meant it. 3 weeks later, I was invited to a board meeting at Viridian. The room was quiet. Clara introduced me, then looked toward the right side of the table, where a man was sitting. The face was so familiar I froze for a moment. Derek. He looked different. Thinner, tired eyes, messy hair, the confidence gone from his face. Clara continued, Derek has been contracted as a temporary consultant for process management. We thought the two of you could talk about what happened and how to make sure it never happens again. The room fell silent. Derek looked up, his gaze flickering when it met mine. I looked back, not smiling, not cold, just steady. Hello, Derek, I said. He nodded, his voice rough. Ava. The meeting lasted almost 2 hours. We discussed systems, people, and company culture. No one mentioned the past, but in every word and every look, we both knew what was written between the lines. Afterward, he caught up with me in the hallway. Ava, he said, voice trembling slightly. I just wanted to say, I'm sorry. I turned toward him. The light from the window fell across his face, exhausted but sincere. I know, I said. But you don't need to be. I'm not angry anymore. He gave a small, broken smile. I deserve to lose everything. I don't think so, I replied. You only lost what you never understood the value of. We stood in silence for a moment. Then he lowered his head and walked toward the elevator, his steps slow. I watched him go. No satisfaction, no bitterness, just the feeling of closing a chapter that had already been written. That evening, I walked by the sea. The sky was clear, the air crisp, the waves soft against the shore. I remembered Derek's first day at NeuraLink, his confident eyes, his proud smile, and then the last day when I stood before the camera holding my resignation letter. Two ends of the same film, one beginning with illusion, the other closing with truth. I sat on a bench, pulled out my phone, and reopened the collaboration email from Veridian. At the bottom, Clara had added a line I hadn't noticed before. We'd like to work with you long term. If you're still interested in rebuilding what once fell apart. I looked out toward the Bay Bridge, the lights shimmering across the water, and I realized that sometimes what we need isn't revenge, but the chance to prove we can build better the second time. I texted Clara, meeting on Monday. I'm ready to begin. When I hit send, I closed the phone and looked up at the night sky. Tiny lights flickered. Maybe stars, maybe planes, maybe reflections on the water. But in that moment, everything seemed bright. Not because of the past, but because I had finally moved beyond it. NeuraLink was a closed chapter. Derek was a lesson learned. And I was no longer the one holding the system together. I was the one who had learned when to let go. In the soft silence of that night, I smiled. Not out of victory, but because at last I had found myself again.